So exactly 100 years after the US entered World War One, the US is now launching Tomahawk missiles at the Syrian government, at the positions of the Syrian government. This is insane. Let's take a look. Here's another one. Here's a report from it
This is
from
an
ABC News.
ABC News special report. Strike on Syria. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
Good evening. We are coming on the air right now because President Trump has just ordered a military strike on Syria. It comes just 2 days after that horrific chemical attack by the Assad regime that killed almost 100 people, including women and children.
Okay, again, perpetuating the lie that that attack was indeed done by the Assad regime. We have no idea who did it. We don't know who did it. But in fact, in 2013, Assad got rid of all of his chemical weapons. So unless he somehow purchased chemical weapons again, or uh, something like that, he shouldn't have any chemical weapons. And this is a tweet from the U.S. State Department from 2014, I believe. So in 2014, the last chemical weapons were removed from the basically the ammunition bases or whatever, the stocks of the Syrian army. Therefore, it couldn't have been Assad, since he does not have chemical weapons. He did not have them. The rebels, however, do have chemical weapons. They did use sarin gas in 2013, as was found out by the UN Commission in Syria. Let's move on with this ABC News report. Again, the media is blatantly lying to you, telling you that Assad was behind the chemical attacks. No evidence of that whatsoever. And it's very unlikely that Assad would do such a dumb thing, which would prompt the US going into a war with him. It is more likely that the chemical attack was a false flag, and that false flag is now being used as a pretext to go and attack Bashar al-Assad.
President Trump called it an affront to all humanity. Now he has retaliated. I'm here with our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz. And Martha, all through this campaign, just 3 days ago, the president saying this is not our fight.
And as soon as he saw those pictures, as soon as he saw those images from that chemical attack, he wanted action. I think this is the single fastest punishing strike I have ever seen. Just a couple of days, he made his decision. I also have to say that Secretary Mattis, who was CENTCOM commander in 2013 when President Obama decided not to take action against Syria, this is something he was frustrated by in 2013. He's now the Secretary of Defense. They had plans in place. And
Okay, so in other words, we need to go kill more Syrians because Syrians killed Syrians. Because as we know, U.S. interventions don't really make stuff much better. They don't really make anything better. In fact, they only make things worse. They only make things worse. And why do they selectively care about this incident when there has been plenty of incidents previously, and mostly all of them, not a single one of those incidents with chemical, chemical gas, whatever, was done by Bashar al-Assad, because, as we know, in 2014 they got rid of his chemical weapons stockpile. Therefore, it couldn't have been Assad. And why would Assad do such a stupid thing when he exactly knows what the reaction from the United States could be? Again, total war propaganda. The prostitutes right here are foaming at their mouths, and they want Trump to go into Syria and kill more people, escalate the conflict further, because they serve the fucking intelligence services. They do. The media is entirely controlled by the CIA. ABC News, CNN, all of them, Fox News, everybody.
On ahead with cruise missiles from Navy ships in the
I
Mediterranean.
want to go to our military consultant, Steve Gaynor in Washington. Steve, you've flown military missions over Iraq. This appears to be Tomahawk cruise missiles against airfields. What does that say to you?
George, it says that the president wanted to not risk any U.S. lives and to punish Assad as quickly as possible. So we think the cruise missiles were launched by 2 U.S. Navy ships, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the USS Ross and the USS Porter, in the eastern Mediterranean. They would have flown likely over Lebanon, low altitude, and come in backdoor and hit targets within Syria in Assad-held terrain.
I want to go to our chief White House correspondent, John Carl. John, the president down in Mar-a-Lago. You're there as well for that summit with President Xi of China, surrounded by his entire brain trust.
He sure is, and I'm told we will hear from the president shortly, a senior official confirming that these were Tomahawk cruise missiles aimed at Syrian regime-held airfields. George, quite a turnaround for this president. This is a president who had, as a candidate, repeatedly said that he was an America First candidate, that Syria was not the United States problem, that we shouldn't focus on the United States. But now, after seeing that chemical weapons attack, he was very blunt.
Oh, sure. No, of course not. Don't give me that bullshit. Of course, it wasn't Trump that, is responsible for this. I mean, Trump is basically now being brought back into the role of submitting to what the shadow forces behind him want. They want a war in Syria. They wanna fucking escalate the whole thing. They want to get rid of Assad. The Saudis want it. Everybody wants it. The U.S. elites want that. So it has nothing to do with the supposed gas attack that most likely was a false flag. It has nothing to do. That is just a pretext. How many times have we seen the U.S. starting wars and going into wars under false pretexts? In World War I started after a U.S. passenger ship was sunk by the Germans. They used that as a pretext. Then in Vietnam, the Vietnam War, right? U.S. military ships were sunk in the Gulf of Tonkin. And it was reported that the North Vietnamese were behind that attack. Something that was entirely made up. And because of that incident in the Gulf of Tonkin, 3 million Vietnamese people died and over 50,000 U.S. soldiers died in Vietnam. There has been a history of false flags that were done by the United States in order to join or start wars. So it is so ridiculous that we have everybody buying that propaganda from ABC News and CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and all of the propaganda outlets that Assad was behind that attack. It's very unlikely that Assad was behind that attack.
Yesterday, speaking in the Rose Garden, that changed his views on Syria, and now he has ordered military action.
I want to go to our chief foreign correspondent, Terry Moran, as well. And Terry, last year you embedded with those Russian troops who are also in Syria, fighting with the United States against ISIS. One of the factors that complicates the U.S. mission here, and we know that the Russians were warning the United States against military action in the Security Council today.
That's right, George. This action by President Trump puts his administration squarely at odds with Vladimir Putin's Russia in Syria. Those Russian troops I embedded with, they changed the war. They saved Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria, and they are fighting not just ISIS, but fighting to protect a long-time Russian strategic interest. They've got a base on the Mediterranean Sea there. They project power throughout the Middle East from their influence in Syria, but they aren't really committed to Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria. They want to do a deal, but this will make it harder.
Okay, Tara Moran and our entire team, thank you very much. We're waiting to hear from President Trump right now. No word yet from the Russians or the Syrians, but President Trump has...
So for the first time in the history of Donald Trump's presidency, the media is for him. The media is for him going into Syria and bombing Assad's positions, escalating the conflict, complicating the situation, killing Syrian soldiers. Absolutely fucking ridiculous, and it's disgusting to see. Truly, it is truly disgusting. Let's take a look at Fox News.
Trump yesterday saying his attitude toward Bashar al-Assad in Syria has changed, and today, in the last 30 minutes, another sign. Secretary of State Tillerson announcing that, quote, steps are underway to organize an international coalition to remove the murderous Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad from power following this week's apparent chemical attack in the war-torn country.
This is not a civil war in Syria. That's probably the first thing we heard, and we heard it over and over again. It is not President Assad against his own people. It is President Assad and the Syrian people all together in unity against outside forces, outside mercenary forces, terror organizations, the names change every day or every other day to try to protect their identity and maybe keep the connection between the country that funded it and that group kind of a little bit more nebulous. But there are groups, mercenary forces, supported by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the United States, and underneath it, Israel, the state of Israel.
Exactly. Exactly right. The state of Israel, Qatar, United States, and underneath it. I think she actually meant to say that Israel is the most important factor behind it, and I wouldn't doubt it. So, Israel has been trying to remove Assad for many, many years, right? Yeah. And they have occupied the Golan Heights. They have trained and funded radical Islamists in Syria. They have produced ISIS propaganda videos purporting to show the beheadings of people. Rita Katz, a Israeli intelligence official, was responsible for the release of those videos. Site Intelligence is the group that created those videos, those propaganda videos, to push for more war in Syria. And of course, now we have everybody on the mainstream media blaming Assad for that chemical attack. It's ridiculous. So yeah, let's take a look at this video. Assad may be many things, but he's not stupid.
Images of human suffering are the kind that can start wars.
These heinous actions by the Assad regime cannot be tolerated.
The US and its allies are adamant that this was a government chemical weapons strike. But why would Assad go and shoot himself in the foot like this? Especially days after the US declared that they were no longer set on removing him from power. A sarin gas attack on a Damascus suburb back in 2013 almost triggered an international intervention. Assad surrendered his entire chemical and biological arsenal to avoid it. Syria claims that in this latest incident, their airstrikes hit a rebel chemical weapons facility, releasing the gas. And then there's also this. In 2013, the Turkish press reported that police had caught Al-Qaeda affiliates on the Syrian border with sarin and/or the chemicals needed to produce it. The same group is known to have stolen around 200 tons of chlorine gas from a government chemical plant back in 2012. The UN even confirmed in 2014 that 2 cylinders seized from the opposition by the Syrian army contained sarin. Some experts claim that rebels don't have the capabilities to make chemical weapons themselves, but sarin has been developed and used by terrorists in the past. In the mid-90s, a Japanese cult produced the nerve agent themselves in a makeshift factory and then used it to kill around 20 people on the Tokyo subway. With world leaders rushing to escalate the war in Syria, why aren't we taking the time to investigate this tragedy fully?
Oh, because it's not about investigating the tragedy. It's about blaming Assad and saying that he's responsible and that we need to remove him. We need another regime change in the Middle East. because that is the agenda. It has been the agenda from the start. And Trump is now complicit.